For over 3,000 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza remained the tallest human-made structure in the world. When its record was finally beaten, it was by the cathedrals of medieval Europe. With its spire reaching 160 meters into the sky, Lincoln Cathedral in England was arguably the first building to become taller than the ancient pyramid. The spire has since been lost, but for centuries to come, other cathedrals would continue to hold the record. Built in the Gothic style, they strove to allow ever more light into their interiors and to soar ever higher into the sky. The Gothic cathedrals were like the skyscrapers of their day, and this similarity was not lost on the architects of the early 20th century. As American cities were being transformed by the advent of the skyscraper, architects were searching for a suitable style to express the height of these towers and the dynamism of the modern age. The answer to some could be found in the architecture of the Gothic cathedral, and this mix between modern engineering and medieval decoration would result in some of the most iconic skyscrapers in the world. In 1910, F.W. Woolworth, the founder of a brand of popular 5 and 10 cent stores, began planning a new headquarters for his company that would be developed together with the Irving National Exchange Bank. Having purchased a rectangular plot of land along Broadway in New York City, he commissioned architect Cass Gilbert to design a 12 to 16 story tall commercial building inspired by the Palace of Westminster in London. The plans were revised several times, resulting in an ever taller building, and when it was finished in 1913, the 12 to 16 stories had turned into 60. With its height of 792 feet or 241 meters, the Woolworth building was the tallest skyscraper in the world, a record that it would keep all the way until 1930. Decorated with complex Gothic tracery and crowned by a once gilded pyramidal roof, this elegant building was hailed as the Cathedral of Commerce. Its ornate cruciform lobby, which is outfitted with Greek marble and a ceiling of glass mosaics, is considered one of the most spectacular of the early 20th century in New York City. The building was a showcase for modern technology, boasting high-speed elevators and a dedicated power plant serving the more than 12,000 people who worked here. Upon completion, the Woolworth Company itself only occupied 1.5 floors, but profited from renting out space to others. Among the early tenants was Columbia Records, who made what are considered to be the first ever jazz recordings in a studio here in 1917. The famous inventor Nikola Tesla also occupied an office in the Woolworth building beginning in 1914, although he was evicted after a year, having failed to pay his rent. The Woolworth Company continued to own the building until 1998, and in the past decade, the top 30 floors have been redeveloped into luxury apartments. The First United Methodist Church of Chicago was founded in 1831, 6 years before the city was incorporated. Having held its first services in the homes of its members, in 1834 the growing congregation built a log cabin north of the Chicago River. A few years later, the cabin was floated across the river and rolled on logs to the church's present site at the corner of Washington and Clark Streets. Over the course of the 19th century, the initial cabin was succeeded by a series of larger buildings, but after World War I, there were those who believed that the church should sell its valuable downtown real estate and move to the growing suburbs. Instead, the leaders decided to stay and to build something truly spectacular on the site. Completed in 1924, the Chicago Temple Building is a skyscraper that not only mimics the style of the medieval cathedrals, it actually functions as a religious building. It contains 23 floors, and rising 568 feet or 173 meters, it was the tallest building in Chicago until 1930. It isn't only used by the church, however. In fact, most of it is rented out as office space, which prevents it from being ranked as the tallest church building in the world. Nonetheless, it contains an ornate neo-Gothic sanctuary on the first floor, capable of seating around 500 people. the top of the building is also used for religious purposes. The Sky Chapel, which is located under the spire some 400 feet, 120 meters above the streets of the city, was created in 1952 as a gift from the Walgreen family in memory of Charles Walgreen, the founder of the pharmacy chain bearing his name. With seating for 30 people and decorated with 16 stained glass windows, this is considered the world's highest worship space. Tribune Tower is the product of one of the most famous architecture competitions of the 20th century. In 1922, the Chicago Tribune announced its intention to construct a new headquarters and invited architects to propose designs. The stated goal was to create, quote, the most beautiful office building in the world, and a total of $100,000 was offered in prize money, with $50,000 going to the winner. The competition worked brilliantly as a publicity stunt. It generated massive press coverage and attracted 263 entries from 23 countries, made in a dizzying range of styles. Many relied heavily on the architecture of the past, whereas others anticipated the austere forms of Bauhaus modernism. One of the more eccentric proposals was made by the Austrian architect Adolf Loos, who turned the building into an enormous Doric column, a pun on the columns printed in the newspaper. The entry that many perceived to be the best was by the Finnish architect Elgar Saarinen. Inspired by the upward sweep of Gothic architecture, he created a modern design that would go on to serve as a strong influence on the next generation of skyscrapers. His entry took second place in the competition. The winning design by New York architects John Mead Howells and Raymond Hood was more conservative and criticized by some for its perceived historicism. Completed in 1925, it reached a height of 462 feet or 141 meters above ground and was topped by a crown instead of a spire, a design choice derived from the late Gothic butter tower of Rouen Cathedral in France. Embedded into the building's base are fragments from more than 120 structures, ranging from Notre Dame Cathedral to the Great Wall of China, while the lobby features inscriptions of patriotic passages and ringing defenses of press freedom. In 2018, the Chicago Tribune ended their 93-year stint at Tribune Tower and moved to One Prudential Plaza. The building has since been converted into condos. Serving as the centerpiece of the University of Pittsburgh's main campus, the Cathedral of Learning was one of the last great neo-Gothic skyscrapers to be built and is the tallest educational building in the Western Hemisphere. It was the brainchild of John Gabbert Bowman, who became the 10th Chancellor of the university in 1921. After assuming his position, he began to dream of a tall building that would serve as a symbol of education for the city and inspire children to seek higher education. He hired Charles Clauder, one of the foremost Gothic architects of the time, to design the tower. After 2 years, the plans were ready and construction went ahead in 1926. The first classes could be held in the building 5 years later, although its formal dedication wasn't held until June 1937. The project wasn't without its detractors. At a height of 535 feet, 163 meters, it was considered by some to be too tall for the city. To get the public on board and at the same time finance the construction, Bowman started a fundraising campaign. An important part of it was to ask local children to contribute 10 cents to, quote, buy a brick for the cathedral. In return, they would get a certificate stating that they owned a part of the building, and more than 97,000 of these certificates are estimated to have been issued. Bowman also involved the community by allowing each nationality that had a significant number of people in Pittsburgh to design their own room in the cathedral. Known as the nationality rooms, there are now as many as 31 of them, most of which function as classrooms. The most grand space in the building is the Commons Room. Called one of the great architectural fantasies of the 20th century, it is a hall built in the English Perpendicular Gothic style that covers half an acre or 2,000 square meters and extends upwards 4 stories, reaching 52 feet or 16 meters from floor to ceiling. It's a piece of true Gothic construction, with the arches being able to support their own weight without the use of steel. Clodder considered the Commons Room to be his greatest achievement. Since 1975, the Cathedral of Learning has been listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and today, Cathy, as the building is colloquially called by many students and residents, remains a beloved part of the University of Pittsburgh's main campus. The popularity of the Gothic skyscraper lasted for a relatively short period in the first few decades of the 20th century. The style was criticized by modernists for the use of historicist ornament on steel frame buildings and was superseded by Art Deco, which incorporated some of its elements. Yet the Gothic skyscrapers left a strong mark on the culture of the day, inspiring writers and filmmakers, and have become some of the most beloved examples of American architecture.